Welcome to an Enchantment of Eternity's review for Raised by Wolves Season 1. In this video, I will get into the entire first season of Raised by Wolves. So if you have not seen Raised by Wolves up to the very end of Season 1, you will not want to watch this video, otherwise some things will be spoiled for you. So, this is a really good show. It's a really interesting show. When I first heard of it, I was hesitant to watch it because the one thing that might have drawn a lot of other people in actually repelled me, and that's Ridley Scott's involvement. Now, Ridley Scott was not the showrunner, but he was an executive producer. He directed a couple episodes, and the son directed more episodes. And Ridley Scott, don't get me wrong, great director, technically wise, one of the best directors out there, but I personally do not like his material. I'm not a fan. In fact, I did a Patreon only video where I named my 5 least favorite directors, and there was a lot of great directors in there that would piss some people off. It's not to say I think they're bad directors, I just get no enjoyment out of their movies, and Ridley Scott was on that list. Now, I thought the first Alien movie was okay, nowhere near as good as the second one. His Blade Runner, I really don't understand why people love that movie so much. I think it's boring. I gave it like 5 chances. I was like, what am I missing? But apparently I still don't know. And I hated Gladiator. And so, yeah, and his newer stuff like Prometheus, yeah, not a fan. Now... So I was actually very hesitant to watch it because of that, but I'm actually glad that I did. Now I think his style and aesthetic is present. Particularly, there's a lot of visual cues that are very reminiscent of Prometheus, but that's okay. Like, I don't mind that as long as the story is good. And I think that the story is very good, and overall, it doesn't remind me too much of Ridley Scott's material. So I actually thought this was a really good show. Now, it was also a really, really dark show. It is very is one of the more sort of, I guess, melancholy or very, very like, trying to find the right word to describe it. It's not something. It's not a feel good show. It's not something. It has a really sense of everything's pointless and that everything is there's no hope for anything. There's no hope to be found in the show, and whatever hope there is in this show, it seems like, well, that's probably not going to work. It's a very downer of a show, and that might repel some people. Although I don't think it's that bad. To me, the most depressing show, or at least for the first season, was the Man in the High Castle. That was too depressing for me. Even the Leftover season 1 was pretty dire, but I still like that. And I still like this. Now, of course, if you're watching this video, you've seen the show, so you know the premise. You know that entire humanity has been wiped out, basically, from a big war between atheists and a religious group called the Mithric. And so and you have, the mother and father, the androids with the Emperors trying to save the human race, and then you have the Ark with the Mithric, and mother ends up destroying the Ark and killing most of the people there. So it's like humanity's like surviving on a sliver, and they're bringing sort of their conflict that destroyed their own world to Kepler. But there's a lot of sort of mysteries and things about Kepler that we still don't understand. In fact, there's some theories that Kepler may or may not have been involved in sending the design specs of the necromancers to the Mithric, and therefore partly responsible for destroying the Earth. But that's just a theory. We don't know that for sure, but we do know that they're sort of hinting at a civilization and an intelligence on Kepler. So it's getting complicated. In fact, the series is very reminiscent of the show Lost, because it's almost like, because Lost was like, what is the island? And they land on this island. Eventually they meet up with natives who are hostile, and there's mysteries involved. And it's kind of like Raised by Wolves is like that with the planet. Like, what is the planet? And they meet up with the natives somehow too, and there's mysteries involved. Although I do have a feeling that, and I could be wrong, but I have a feeling that the mysteries on Kepler are more scientific in nature rather than fantastical in nature like Lost was. Just a guess, they could be fantastical. I don't know. Because here's the thing, the show has introduces like the prophecy. The Mithridatic has this prophecy where they have like, oh, who is the chosen one, or I can't remember the exact term they use, but who's the special one? Like, some people think it's Campion, the atheist boy, and some people think it's Paul, because they refer to it as an orphan, and then Caleb or Marcus, Caleb disguised as Marcus, Ragnar Rothbrook, he thinks that it's him. But of course, he's gone crazy. I think that it's no one. I think the prophecy's bullshit. And they're just... Alright, so let me just jump right into my theories here. So, throughout the show, we hear the voice of Soul. I'm doing air quotes. You can't see me because it's audio recording, but Soul, the god that the Mithridatic worship. And so Soul, air quotes, talks to Marcus, and apparently also talked to the rapist guy. And he talks to Paul towards the end of the series. The season, sorry. So, who is this Saul? Well, my theory is that it's not Saul, which is why I'm doing air quotes, that it is in fact a telepathic alien presence on Kepler. And that same presence also pretended to be the real Campion, not Kid Campion, but of course the Campion who created Mother and Father. And he appeared, or it, whatever this being is, I'll just refer to it as an entity because it's just a made-up theory of mine. But the entity pretended to be Saul and also pretended to be Campion to Mother, and the entity is what impregnated Mother and what gave birth to the snake. Now, the entity could, in fact, be the consciousness that somehow survived of these snake beings, because they were hinted at earlier in the season where we saw the bones of the serpents, and so I would guess that they were the dominant species on this planet, and they were somehow extinct, but somehow their consciousness survived, and they found a way to reinvigorate themselves by impregnating Mother. Now, the reason, and it's somehow related to that weird whatever shape hexagon. I don't know if it was hexagon, but whatever the fuck that is, that thing that the Mithridatic found that they thought was a holy ark or whatever, is related to that. It could maybe be what housed the consciousness. I don't know, but anyway, so it basically wanted to impregnate Mother. It knew it could use Mother to impregnate it to reinvent itself. And so it seems like everything they were telling people were sort of pushing it. Now, I don't know so much about, I think his name is Orthos, that, rapist guy who had that thing on his head. I don't know. I think he was just crazy. I don't think Soul actually, because we didn't actually see Soul talk to him. He just said Soul talked to him, so he could just be dumb and crazy. But we did see Soul talk to Marcus, and Soul kept telling Marcus not to kill Mother. Of course, it didn't want to kill Mother because it needed Mother in order to impregnate it. And later, Soul talked to Paul to destroy the whatever navigational thing from their shuttle pod or whatever they call it, so that it couldn't fly. Of course they wanted to do that, because as we saw at the end of the episode, Mother and Father, as soon as they learned what the snake thing was, their first reaction was to get it in the pod and fly it away and kill it. And so I think this consciousness also has foresight, like it can see in the future, or at least it knew that this was a possibility. So that's why it wanted Paul to destroy the thing. And also, yeah. So, and also, of course, it was pretending to be Campion, so it could impregnate Mother. So that's my theory. That was it's an entity, alien entity on Kepler that is pretending to be Saul and pretending to be Campion. Therefore, the whole prophecy, it's just using, that prophecy existed already, and it's just using it to recreate it and make people believe that the prophecy is coming true when in fact it's not. It's just a bullshit prophecy. It's just religious nonsense. That's my theory. I could be wrong about that. Now, how it relates to why people keep sawing Talia, the Campion's younger sister who died, and what all those weird drawings were, and why they're moving, and what's up with those, the hooded figure we kept saying, who apparently is like some form of humanoid, or it tried to kill Mother right before she gave birth, so I think it's clear that they're not in line with these serpent things, and maybe there was some sort of war. And of course, Mother had the vision of all these hooded figures. So when Mother kept saying, "Oh, I feel safe," or my real mission was actually the baby, not the race Campion, and Campion was just practice for that. That's lies. That's the entity lying to Mother, and that's the entity took Mother to give birth to basically their home. That's why there was a whole bunch of creatures around there. It's not a safe place for them. And so her feeling that she feels safe and that's where she needed to be was lies that the entity were implanting because they wanted her to give birth, using the embryo to sort of give her those feelings that actually are not in her interest. And yeah, so that's my theory about that. So now let me talk a bit about what I actually thought of the show. Well, first of all, if I'm theorizing it, I think, of course, I enjoyed the show. I thought it was interesting. I like the complexities of it. I love that we're introduced to Marcus, this Mithraic captain, and then the next episode we showed that he's actually not Mithraic. He's an atheist, and we also meet his wife Sue, or Mary, and the backstory of how they, killed the real Marcus and Sue and took over their identities, and so, but Mary sort of was barren, so she always had these motherly instincts but couldn't raise a child herself, so she actually really became a mother to Paul. And that was really interesting, as throughout the show, she was desperate to save Paul and get her back from the necromancer. And then, of course, towards the end, Paul actually found out who she was. And I do think that the entity is telepathic in nature and sort of can read the thoughts. And that's how it knew who Sue's real identity was. And knew it was in his best interest to pit them against each other. Just my thought. Also, throughout the show, they keep talking about this tropical zone. Oh, we gotta make it. One day we'll go to the tropical zone. Oh, this is tropical zone. I didn't actually expect to see it this season. I thought we're never gonna see this. I thought it was almost mythical, but we actually do see that Mother and Father get stranded there at the end of the season. So that's very interesting. I do think it was a dumb move for Father to go in a little pod, whatever it's called, with Mother, because he should. I almost wanted Mother to say, no, you need to stay behind and raise the children. I know later they were like, right when they were going to die, they're like, oh, the kids will be fine, Campion will be a leader. But how do they know that? I think Father should have stayed behind. But anyway, I like the journey that Mother and Father had throughout the show. I love the pacing. I love how the first episode went through a lot of story. It went through a lot of background of these androids being in 12 years and then eventually settled into when the Ark arrived and we get these the long play. I love the whole sequence when Mother destroyed the Ark. That was really exciting. Really enjoyed it. And then we get the introduction of the children from the Ark that Mother took over. And it's interesting seeing them grow and how some sided more with the Mithric and refused to give up their religion, while others, such as Tempest, who was raped in hibernation, was more willing to give it up. And then you have a younger girl, can't recall her name off the top of my head, but she was more willing to give up this religion too. But eventually they all came around to seeing Mother. Even Hunter, like Hunter was the oldest one, so he was the most resistant to it, but even eventually he came around to seeing Mother as a caring figure, which is very interesting, and I think was a very interesting journey. Now, the period of time where they had the Mithric took over Mother and Father's camps, and they held Mother captive, and they brainwashed or reprogrammed Father, that dragged a bit for me. I wasn't as interested. I was like really wanting them to like break free of this, and I think it got a lot more interesting once they did. Once Father returned to his own programming, I don't know. I just didn't find that very interesting, and that's just me. I don't know why. I did like the sort of unsteady friendship that Campion and Paul had. How they were friends, but they're often fight and they're often at odds. I always thought that was very interesting. And I did like it very much when Sue ended up being in the same camp as Mother and the other children. I thought that was a very interesting turn of events, because it's obvious that Sue was still an atheist. That she very much, like when the Mithric took over their camp and Campion was resisting being baptized, and that you could see that Sue was secretly cheering for that. Whereas Marcus, on the other hand, of course, he went a bit off the deep end, and now he's a believer because of, I think, the entity sort of brainwashed and damaged him. And honestly, I think they should have just killed this character off at this stage. I don't know what good keeping him around will do, but maybe Season 2 will tell me. Maybe they'll do something very useful for Season 2. Plus, you know, it's Ragnar Rothbrook. They had to keep him around in the show a bit longer. And then, of course, the big reveal in the finale is the Atheists have come, which counters the belief that it's very contrary to what it shows, that not only did the Mithric believe this, but Mother and Father believed this as well. So it shows that not all their information was correct. First of all, they thought that all of humanity was sort of gone, that there was no one left alive on Earth after they left, was clearly not the case. They also thought that the atheists were incapable of sending humans to Kepler. Like, even the original Campion thought this, which is why he sent Mother and Father with a bunch of embryos. He did, because he didn't believe that the atheists had the capability of sending live humans the same way that the Mithric did. But apparently they do. So that is going to be really interesting, how that sort of plays out. Now, first of all, I think having the Mithric and atheists, like, the Mithric is shown as very sort of dogmatic, and like they call anyone who doesn't believe their beliefs impure, and they basically want to kill them, so they're not really good guys. But on the other hand, so that makes you more sympathetic to the atheists, but then again, the atheists are kind of like, they talk about in Marcus and Sue's backstory, or sorry, Caleb and Mary's backstory, they talk about how they've been they were indoctrinated as children and forced to fight and treated like shit, so they're actually not much better. They look kind of like Mad Max type, Fury Road type people anyway. Like, yeah, so they're not much better. So it's going to be interesting seeing how they're integrated into the show. So, overall, as I said, I really enjoyed the show. I like theorizing about it. I don't think maybe it was the best thing ever, but I did like it. So, my rating for Raised by Wolves Season 1 out of 10 is an 8. Extremely good. Really enjoyed the show. Really look forward to seeing more of it. I hope they expand upon it. I hope it gets better. Apparently, they have a 5-year plan, which is good to hear that they're just not making it up as they go like Lost was, because they're kind of, it feels like Lost in terms of we don't know what's going on. So hopefully they start to, and I thought actually this finale of Season 1 did give us some significant answers, particularly of what the baby was, that it was this weird snake, and also Yeah, it's kind of hinted that this that Saul was lying to them. So that's very interesting. Anyway, that's it for my review of Raised by Wolves Season 1. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please check out my channel as I do many more reviews on other shows like Lower Decks, Star Trek, The Expanse, BoJack Horseman, The Boys, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all that. And thanks a lot for watching.